Okay, good morning. This is Senate Natural Resources and Energy, and it is January 22nd, and we are joined today by Mike on Land Trust. I think we should go around and introduce ourselves, and then I'll let you take it away. Ruth Hardy would be right here, and she'll be joining us shortly from the Addison District.
Terry Williams, son of Walton County.
And Washington District, and Ruth, would you mind?
Oh, I'm Jude Newman, the committee assistant.
Great, thank you.
Seth Longart's Bennington Senate District.
Scott Van County District.
Thank you.
Nice to meet you all. So Abby White, I'm Executive Vice President with the Vermont Land Trust. And I'm here with my colleague, Peter Van Loan. Peter, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, hi everyone. Thanks for inviting us today. I am the Forest Program Director for Vermont Land Trust, working out of the Brattleboro office.
Great.
Great to have you.
Thank you so much. So we're here to do an overview of the Vermont Land Trust, who we are, what we do. We're happy to take any questions that you have about us or about conservation in general. And if there's more questions than you have time for, then perhaps we could come back and have a longer conversation. But I'll just get going here. So our purpose, we're founded in 1977. So we're 2 years, we'll be 50 years old. And I like to tell folks that we do three things. We help people protect land, care for that land, and also connect to that land. A bit more about us, as I said, founded in 77. We have conserved over 11% of Vermont, and that equates to roughly 647,000 acres of farmlands and forest lands. There are other land trusts in the state that you might be familiar with, smaller land trusts. We are the largest and we are statewide. We work very collaboratively with smaller land trusts. As the largest land trust, we have the skills and capability to hold easements. So that's a big part of what we do. I'll explain what that means in just a moment. We've always had a focus on working lands, on farms and forests. So we've protected over 1,100 farms and over 450,000 acres of forest land. Every conservation easement is forever, it's perpetual. And so we, as a land trust, we hold those easements and we ensure that the protections that they describe are upheld. And so we have relationships with over 2,000 landowners across Vermont. We monitor what's happening on those lands, both through technology such as LiDAR, but we also do visits. And it's our intent to get out at least every other year to walk the land with landowners, hear more about their goals. And in that process, we also identify opportunities for additional protections. So for example, in a lot of the farmland that has been conserved, there's wetlands on every farm in Vermont. There are streams and wetlands everywhere. And so oftentimes when we're walking the land, we identify opportunities along with the landowner to enhance those protections, whether that's adding additional kind of legal protections for that, or just doing restoration work. And so that could include planting trees, that could involve restoring wetlands or removing dams. We provide those services as well. We're a member supported organization, so we have over 3,000 members throughout the state. 47 employees, most of those employees are out in communities. We have people covering the entire state and embedded in those communities. Our operating budget is around, it kind of varies between $7 and $8 million. That is just the resources that we use to operate basically our staff and our buildings, et cetera. There is a lot of additional money that flows through Vermont Land Trust from the state and federal agencies to buy development rights. And so a lot of that in Vermont obviously comes through Vermont Housing Conservation Board. And we have 5 offices: Montpelier, Richmond, Newport, Woodstock, and Brattleboro. Great. So Peter, I'm gonna turn it over to you to talk through a bit more about how we do the work we do.
Okay, great. Thanks, Abby. I would, so one of the main things that we do is, or our main tool for conservation is called a conservation easement. And you may have heard it said that when we do conservation easements, we're buying the development rights. And although that's technically true, I suppose, I think it's more accurate to say what we're doing is paying the landowner to promise to never develop their land in certain ways, in certain commercial and residential ways. But what we are committing to is, as Abby said, making sure that that promise is lived up to forever, because these are perpetual easements. When you negotiate an easement with VLT, you negotiate it. We negotiate together, so we meet everybody's goals, the landowner's goals, and the land trusts. As Abby said, our easements are focused on forestry, agricultural, and recreational uses. And so there's language in there to make sure that all those things are done well and sustainably. But simply having the words on the page doesn't necessarily mean it's all going to go well. So we have a stewardship department, and those folks take over once the property is conserved and build a relationship with the landowner. We need to build trusting relationships with these folks because it's a perpetual easement. We have, as Abby said, over 2,000 easements on 640,000 plus acres of land in Vermont. And so because we have such a large footprint, or the ability to have a say in the management of so much of Vermont, over 11% of Vermont, we really feel like we have a responsibility to bring landowners, all landowners, resources to help them with their management challenges. So we have 4 professional foresters, an ecologist, a number of botanists, and people with deep experience in the farming world on staff to help folks with all sorts of challenges. Some of the resources that we develop for owners are done on lands that we own. We have properties throughout the state that we use as demonstration forests or demonstration properties, where we do things like creative and innovative forest management to ensure continued forest resilience through climate change. We're building beaver dam analogs to improve stream health. We're treating ash trees across the state to preserve the genetic diversity of ash through the emerald ash borer outbreak. And I'll talk about some of these things in a little bit more detail later. We also have a very successful program that helps farmers access land. We do this in a couple of ways. If a farmer, an established farmer, is in transition, maybe selling to the next generation or just retiring and getting out of farming, we can pay that farmer for their conservation easement, and the value of that easement then depresses the cost that the value that the landowner needs to get out of the land, so the subsequent owner can buy it at a reduced price. Another thing we do is identify properties around the state that are important farm properties going on the market, and we'll buy those and hold them for a certain period of time, usually 2 to 5 years. And during that period, we will lease the property to a newer aspiring farmer who we think can be successful on that land. And while they're leasing it, they get to become familiar with the land and its capabilities, and they start to build their own capital, and then we sell it to them at a reduced rate with the conservation easement on it. And we share all this work, the innovation, stories, challenges, successes, the triumphs, and with our events program that does workshops and webinars throughout the year. And of course, we do print and online publications as well. In fact, we had a very successful webinar last week on old forests. And if you're interested in that, you can check it out on our YouTube channel.
Thanks, Peter.
Yeah, sure.
So just a few highlights from our last year. We protected over 8,700 acres. That's roughly average of what we do in a given year. Sometimes it's more, sometimes it's less, depending on the nature of the lands that are protected. That was 6,300 acres of forest land, 2,400 acres of farmland. Again, that split is about typical for what we do. We helped 7 farm families buy land. I don't have to tell you that there's an affordability crisis in Vermont, and that goes for farms as well. And it's becoming more and more difficult for new and beginning farmers to gain access to land. And Vermont Land Trust is one of the really only programs in Vermont that helps to do that. And buying land, conserving that land, buying down the value, and then helping people be able to afford it. There are, as Peter described, ways that we also will hold land for a period of time. So if there's a farm that's at risk of development, if it's in a good location, close to markets, has high quality soils, we can come in and we can buy that farm. We have debt capital that enables us to do that. And we hold it for 3 to 5 years, lease it to a farmer, get them on the land, help them build a business. And over time, the goal is for that farmer then to purchase that land. And so right now we own roughly 10 farms where we're doing that. That's a bit about the farming. Again, protected 38 miles along rivers and streams and 240 acres of wetlands, a lot of that on farms. Planted over 7,700 trees. We do a lot of that work in partnership with local communities and Audubon and other nonprofits. On land that we own, we grow food, and that food becomes available to people that are in need of that food, through food shelves and other means. We support community gardens on the lands that we own as well. Particularly, there's kind of 3 flagship properties I just mentioned quickly. One is in Woodstock, it's King Farm. It's actually the birthplace of conservation. It's the very first Vermont Land Trust was founded there. Newport, we own a Bluffside Farm on the shores of Lake Memphremagog, and then also Brewster Uplands Conservation Trust that's in Cambridge, and there's community gardens and trails on all of their properties. And then again, 1,000 events connecting, people, whether they're landowners or just folks who are nature lovers, which is a lot of Vermont. People are really eager to learn about land and about how they can be good stewards of that land.
The farms that you own, those 3 that you just, they're working farms that are producing food. Where do you produce the food and who does it? Do you have staff that you do?
On one of the properties, Brewster Uplands, there is a farmer that leases land from us and actually has their own business. And some of that produce from that farm is supporting his business, but some of it also goes into the food bank and local shelters. But yes, this is on land that we own. Another one I want to mention is Pine Island Community Farm, and that's based in Colchester. It's a new American community, and there's a community garden that supports 50 families who are growing food for themselves, for their families, their subsistence food, all culturally aligned for them, for the foods that they grew up with, that they're familiar with. So I think that's also included. Okay. Yeah. Okay, keep going here. Also, if you like paper, and you don't have to take one if you don't, I just want to pass around our annual report that provides a bit more information, including these statistics. Okay, I'll keep going here. Peter, I think this one is you.
Yeah, so
Thanks.
thanks, Abby. So I'm going to talk a little bit about climate resilience and the work that we're doing. This could be a 2 or 3 day seminar, but I'm going to try to get through it pretty quick. And so I would just offer that if anybody's interested in hearing more about this or wants to get out on the ground and see it, feel free to contact me, and I'm glad to talk to you about it. And if we can work something out to get out on the ground and see it, all the better. So I would say probably one of the most impactful things that we do for climate resilience is to conserve forest land. And we've been doing that for over 40 years. You've likely heard the mantra, keep forests, save forests, and that kind of says it all, right? Conserving forests allows them to continue to do all the things we depend on them for, like improving water quality, attenuating flooding, providing firewood and other forest products, wildlife habitat, recreational opportunities, storing and sequestering carbon. All those things are protected every time we conserve a piece of woods. We have thousands of easements, and some of them are pretty old. And there are times when we're motivated either by a new funding opportunity or the realization that there's a resource on there that we didn't realize existed. And as Abby mentioned, we'll do what's called an overlay easement. A couple of examples of this are river corridor easements that we do in partnership with the Department of Environmental Conservation, or DEC. They have priority reaches of streams and all around the state, on which they can pay landowners to do or refrain from doing certain things that both enhance the buffers on those streams and allow the rivers access to their floodplain and allow them to flow in their natural course. It's a great program because it provides the owner, often a farmer, with a little bit of extra income, allows them to continue to use that land, but also protects a critical resource that'll help us down the line with flood control. We also have done overlay easements to protect rare species and natural communities that have been found during stewardship visits. And this is a tool that I think can play a critical role in achieving the goals of Act 59, the 30 by 30, 50 by 50 law. Another thing that we're doing and have been doing for a long time, but are being a little bit more intentional about, is ecosystem restoration. Abby touched on this as well. So related to some of the water quality work I mentioned above, we're doing dam removals to restore free-flowing streams. We're also digging out wetlands that have been filled in and using LIDAR to reestablish them in their original footprint. We're creating beaver dam analogs that help repair incised streams and enhance the stream's ability to access its floodplain. And then up on the land, we're helping people deal with introduced invasive species challenges by demonstrating integrative pest management practices on lands that we own, and also establishing and supporting so-called cooperative invasive species management associations, which are volunteer groups in watersheds or counties who help landowners deal with introduced invasive species. And we're also working in a variety of ways to ensure that ash will continue to be a thread in the fabric of our woods through the emerald ash borer outbreak. On the farming side, we have what's called a conservation innovation grant. That's a federal grant that's paying farmers to do certain rotational grazing and other practices. It's meant to be a research project, so we're tracking the impact of those practices on soil health and on soil carbon. The idea behind these grants is that they provide funds for people to do this research on new land management practices, and then those practices may be chosen by the NRCS, or Natural Resource Conservation Service, to adopt as new cost share practices for landowners across the country. And as I said, we turn all this work into resources for landowners, all landowners, not just owners of conserved land. We share them through in-person visits, through workshops, webinars, e-news, newsletters, social media channels, and annual reports, and all the great work that Abby and her team does. So I guess I'll leave it there. And like I said, if you want to hear more, I'm glad to talk about this for as long as you want.
Okay. Okay, so I think now we're gonna get into just a few examples. And we can open it up for questions.
So the Atlas Timberlands project is pretty unique in our history. Back in the late 1990s, we partnered with the Vermont chapter of the Nature Conservancy to buy 26,000 acres of timberland in the northern part of the state. You see it shown there in the bright red. The idea here was to manage this land for its timber and ecological values and to show that you could do that on land that had been treated very differently in the past. This was new to both organizations. TNC was relatively new to timber harvesting, and although we had been doing careful forest management on our lands for a long time, the kind of ecological management that was being practiced here was different from what we'd done before. And like I said before, more intentional. We owned it for a couple of decades and learned a ton about how to do ecological management. And that helps to inform how we do conservation now and how we educate people on the values of ecosystem management. After about 2 decades, we transferred most of the parcels to private owners with an easement that reflects the goals and upholds the goals of that original Atlas Timberlands partnership. There are 2 huge properties that were sold to TNC and the Northeast Wilderness Trust, and these properties are unique in that they'll make significant contributions to old forest targets in the Vermont conservation design and help achieve the goals of Act 59 because they'll largely be left to evolve naturally, and they contain a lot of really high value natural communities in priority forest blocks.
Thanks, Peter.
Sure.
And just a quick farm example. So this is Valley Green Farm based in Cambridge. This was initially conserved in 1992, one of the earliest farm projects, 360 acres. It was initially a conventional dairy farm. And as it's evolved, it's become a diversified organic veggie and flower farm. It has a farm store, events, and hosts trails. And last year in 23, or actually 2 years ago now, we added additional protections along with the farmer to protect 64 acres of wetlands. And so this is just a perfect example, I think, of how the value of conservation is enduring. Something that was conserved in 1992 continues to add value today. And these are lands where we can go back and we can add, as I said, additional protections and improve the ecological health of those lands. As Peter described, when we do that, there's capital that becomes available to the farmer. And so it's a win-win. It's a win for the farmer in terms of boosting their financial viability. And then it's also, of course, a win for the farmland and the soils and the ecological health of that land. And I think this is just a really important point to keep in mind. This is really
Sorry to interrupt, but it seems like everybody is muted, so I can't actually hear what's going on in the room. I'm sorry to interrupt, but it seems like everybody's muted in the room, so I can't actually hear what's going on.